All right, so I was watching this episode, Family Guy Season 20, Episode 6, Happy Birthday Dog, and I couldn't help but think about the sheer audacity of the network. They're out there pushing these increasingly bizarre, almost experimental plots. And you know who's usually behind the camera, steering this whole crazy ship? It's usually Rich Appel or Steve Callaghan, guys who've been with the show forever, guys who have seen it all. And then I look at this episode, and I think, did they really think this was the best path forward? Because let me tell you, this one is a ride. It starts with that classic Family Guy intro, the one that always feels a little bit like a fever dream set to music, singing about the good old days and lucky there's a Family Guy. And then bam, we're at Brian's birthday party. And from the jump, you can tell things are going to be weird. Peter, in his infinite wisdom, spaces on Brian's actual name, calling him Brent. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if Peter even knows he has a dog, or if Brian is just some freeloading acquaintance who happens to shed. And then Brian, bless his doggy heart, is already questioning the whole concept of a party for an animal. He's got the right idea, though. Why waste money on something that can't even appreciate a fancy new squeaky toy? The gifts are already a sign of things to come. Joe gives him this stick, which he weirdly claims was a magic wand that caused a bus crash. I mean, sure, Joe, that totally tracks. And then there's the card that says, "Too much sex ruins your eyesight," and is all blurry inside. It's supposed to be from Aunt Judy and Uncle Bob, and Brian's reaction is basically, this joke is so old it deserves its own birthday party. This is where the episode starts to feel like it's trying too hard, you know? Like they threw a bunch of ideas at the wall and just hoped something would stick. And speaking of sticking, old Joe decides to practice his stakeout skills by watching Brian's party from across the street. Because that's how stakeouts work, apparently. Just chill on the sidewalk and observe. He even quotes Leviticus, which is definitely a choice for a joke about a dog's birthday. The sheer randomness of it all. And you know, as Joe's staking out, the rest of the gang is dealing with the fallout of Brian's birthday. Peter starts roasting Brian, and it's the kind of humor that feels, well, it feels like Family Guy. He brings up Brian's inability to perform, even referencing Viagra, and then makes a joke about Brian rolling over and begging for an erection. It's crude, it's a little much, and Brian's reaction is just resignation. He's used to this. He's heard it all before. Lois tries to smooth things over, but Peter doubles down, saying Brian's latest book was so good he turned the pages into toilet paper because Brian's too old to satisfy women. It's a wild chain of insults, and you can't help but wonder if Peter is just projecting his own insecurities. And then the show throws in that bizarre Uber driver ninja warrior segment. I mean, what even is that? A ninja driving an Uber, swinging on gold chains over a cologne bath, trying to pick up a passenger while on 4 phone calls? It's the kind of non-sequitur that makes you question your own sanity. It's so disconnected from the Brian party plot that you'd think it was a glitch in the Matrix. It's like they needed to fill runtime and just threw in whatever animation they had lying around. And after all that, we get to Stewie. He's convinced he has cooties, and it all stems from playing with Play-Doh with everyone ever. He's having a meltdown about being played with. It's a classic Stewie hyperbole, but the premise itself is kind of funny, the idea of cooties being this modern-day plague. He wants chocolate milk, but Lois says that's the snack, so it's like, okay, the rules of the universe are different in this house. The whole cootie scare leads to a doctor's visit, and the doctor, in typical Family Guy fashion, is incredibly blunt. He tells Stewie he's tested positive for cooties and that he needs to get his affairs in order. The absurdity of a baby getting his affairs in order. He even drops a depends joke, which is just, yeah, that's Family Guy for you. And as Stewie is dealing with his terminal cooties, Brian is still stuck with Joe's stakeout, which is somehow still going on. Joe's not even at the party anymore. He's just out there somewhere, staring. The episode then pivots to Chris's career day. He wants to be a ninja cop, and Joe is supposed to be his hat. But Joe's on his stakeout, so Chris has to improvise. He basically just yells, "Hi-ya!" and pretends to be a ninja. And then his dad's car gets towed from a handicap spot. The sheer incompetence of the Griffin men on full display. Meanwhile, Stewie is really leaning into his cooties diagnosis. He's taking a Flintstones cocktail of pills, 17 Barneys, 18 Wilmas. It's a visual gag that's both hilarious and a little unsettling. He's also got a 20-year-old nurse who wears homemade sandals and has no medical training. It's the kind of detail that makes you think, is this show trying to give me a stress-induced cootie diagnosis too? Brian, bless him, tries to be the voice of reason, telling Stewie he's being dramatic. But Stewie's convinced. He's even got a Make-A-Wish application to meet Gritty, the mascot for the Philadelphia Flyers. It's such a specific, random wish, it almost makes sense in the world of Family Guy. And then the episode takes a sharp left turn into Peter and Lois's bedroom. Peter's got no appetite, and Lois is trying to figure out why. He accidentally calls her Bonnie. The look on his face. You can tell he knows he's messed up. And Meg, in her usual fashion, tries to spice it up by suggesting they try it from behind. It's a classic Meg moment where she's trying to be helpful but just makes things awkward. And then Stewie, in full theatrical mode, declares he's Tony Award winner Stewie Griffin Styles, and that Rupert is inheriting everything and a trust for when he gets sober. It's a darkly funny meta joke about Stewie's love for Rupert and his dramatic flair. Brian's still there, trying to film him from the right angle, which is apparently the left side. It's a whole visual gag about communication breakdown. Then the Make-A-Wish reveal. Stewie gets accepted. He's gonna meet Gritty. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated joy for Stewie, but then it quickly devolves. He's not going to pee in a cup for Gritty. It's like even in his wildest dreams, Stewie can't escape the indignity. He's also got this opera playing, The Wheels on the Bus in Italian. It's a great example of Stewie's pretentious side coming out. Brian's had enough. He tells Stewie he's taken it too far, washing his hands of his cooties. And then Stewie compares Brian to Rupert when he was drinking, which is a low blow, even for Stewie. The doorbell rings, it's Bonnie, and Peter, in a moment of panic, runs to get it. Then Chris has this interaction with Bonnie where she asks if he's masturbated. It's a deeply uncomfortable moment that frankly feels a little too real in its awkwardness. Lois is inside wondering why Peter isn't eating. He's still dealing with the Bonnie confusion. And then the episode shifts again. Stewie is apparently going to Vermont for physician-assisted suicide because his disease has become a burden. He leaves Brian a video message about his funeral suits, one black for the wake, one wool for the Graham story. It's peak Stewie, planning his death with the same meticulousness he plans his evil schemes. He even mentions a penis-enlarging machine in his closet, which Brian is clearly tempted to check out. The whole thing is so over the top, and Brian is convinced he's driven his best friend away. The real twist? Stewie's not actually dying. He's at a Phish show in Burlington, pushing himself over the edge. It's a classic Family Guy bait and switch, where they build up this huge dramatic situation and then pull the rug out from under you. He's fine. He was just being Stewie, being dramatic. The episode ends with a callback to Joe's stakeout, and Peter is still confused about calling Lois Bonnie. It's a messy, chaotic episode, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? It's a whirlwind of bizarre plot threads that barely connect, but somehow it's still recognizably Family Guy. It's the kind of episode that makes you either laugh or just stare blankly at the screen, wondering what you just witnessed. It's a testament to the show's longevity that they can still churn out stuff this weird after all these years. Okay, so if you're digging these deep dives into the absolute madness that is Family Guy, and you've made it this far, chances are you appreciate a good, honest breakdown of what makes these episodes tick, or sometimes spectacularly fall apart. If that sounds like you, then maybe consider, hitting that subscribe button. It's like the little ding of a notification, but for your soul. It tells me you're here for the ride, and honestly, I'm just glad to have you. This episode, Happy Birthday Dog, feels less like a cohesive story and more like a Mad Libs generator that got wildly out of control. On the surface, it's Brian's birthday, but that's just the flimsy excuse to throw a bunch of random scenarios at the wall. We've got Brian's existential dread about being a dog, Peter's usual brand of clueless cruelty, Stewie's melodramatic Cootie crisis, and Joe's never-ending stakeout. The writers tried to stitch these disparate threads together, but it often feels like they're just jumping from one gag to the next without much thought for narrative flow. The theme, if you can call it that, seems to be about the absurdity of life and the character's inability to cope with it in any sane way. Brian grapples with his identity and the futility of it all, Peter stumbles through life in a haze of ignorance, and Stewie weaponizes his anxieties to an absurd degree. It's a familiar stew of Family Guy cynicism, but this time it feels particularly unfocused. Where does this episode sit in the grand scheme of things? Honestly, it feels like a mid-season filler episode, the kind they churn out to keep the lights on. It doesn't advance any major character arcs or set up any significant future plots. It's more of a collection of sketches than a developed narrative. The writing quality is, well, it's Family Guy. You get the usual mix of genuinely funny lines interspersed with jokes that fall flat or feel like they're trying too hard to be edgy. The jokes about Brian's age and perceived sexual inadequacy are tiresome, and Stewie's Cootie plot feels like it was pulled from a less creative era of the show. The pacing is all over the place. We'll spend a decent chunk of time on Brian's birthday party, then abruptly cut to a random animated segment, then back to the party, then to Stewie's doctor's visit, all without much transition. It makes the episode feel disjointed. Visually, it's standard Family Guy fare. Nothing particularly stands out in terms of animation or direction, which is probably for the best, given how scattershot the plot is. My personal verdict on this episode? It's a mess. A well-intentioned mess, maybe, but a mess nonetheless. It's not the worst episode of Family Guy by a long shot, but it's far from the best. It's the kind of episode that makes you appreciate the tighter, more focused stories the show is capable of, and it makes you wonder if maybe they should have just called it a day after Brian's birthday party and left it at that. It's a frustrating watch because you can see glimmers of good ideas, but they're buried under so much random nonsense. It's a 4.7 out of 10. It's got some laughs, but the overall experience is just too scattered and uninspired to be truly enjoyable. Let's dive into the chaos, moment by moment. First up, that opening scene, Brian's birthday party. Peter, bless his heart, forgets Brian's name, calls him Brent. It's supposed to be funny, right? The idea that the patriarch of the family can't even remember the name of the dog he's supposed to be celebrating. But it's also kind of sad. Brian, this supposedly intelligent, articulate dog, is reduced to a generic placeholder in Peter's mind. And Brian's reaction? He's just resigned. He knows this is how it is. He's not even offended, just stating facts. His name you remember, he says to Kevin, whoever Kevin is. It's a sharp little jab that highlights how little Peter values Brian beyond his convenience. It's the foundation of Brian's character arc in this episode, his struggle for recognition and meaning in a world that often overlooks him. It's a bleak start, but it sets the tone. Then there's Joe's magic wand stick. He gives it to Brian, claiming it once crashed a bus. The visual of Joe, a grown man, seriously presenting a stick as a powerful magical artifact is inherently absurd. But it's the story behind it that's truly bizarre. He says he pointed it at a bus, and it crashed. This isn't just a funny prop. It's a glimpse into Joe's skewed reality and his history of accidental destruction. It hints at a past where his actions, however unintentional, have had serious consequences. It's a dark undercurrent to the otherwise lighthearted, or, Family Guy lighthearted, birthday celebration. If I were writing this, I'd have Joe describe the bus crash in excruciating detail, with sound effects and everything, just to highlight the sheer lunacy of it. Make it a full-on disaster movie short. Next up, the Uber driver Ninja Warrior segment. Oh boy, this is where the episode completely loses its mind. A ninja driving an Uber, navigating a cologne bath, and trying to pick up passengers while on 4 phone calls? It's pure, unadulterated surrealism. The visual of a ninja trying to maintain his composure while juggling rideshare etiquette and e-cigarette needs is hilarious. The premise itself is so far removed from reality that it's almost impressive. What is it even trying to say? Maybe it's a commentary on the absurd demands of modern gig economy work, or maybe it's just the writers throwing animated spaghetti at the wall. Either way, it's a moment that makes you pause and question the very nature of what you're watching. If I were directing this, I'd make the cologne bath smell visibly overpowering, like a thick cartoon fog, and have the ninja's mask get completely soaked. And when he tries to pick up the passenger, have the passenger be someone completely oblivious, asking if they can plug in their phone. It's the contrast between the ninja's internal struggle and the passenger's mundane request that makes it. Then we have Peter's roast of Brian. This is where the show leans into its comfort zone of mean-spirited humor. Peter brings up Brian's inability to perform sexually, mentioning Viagra and rolling over and begging for an erection. It's crude, it's predictable, and it's frankly a bit tiresome. Brian's reaction, however, is key. He's not angry, he's just weary. He delivers that line, "That's sort of just another jab at my penis, but sure." It's delivered with such deadpan resignation that it's almost funnier than Peter's actual joke. It shows how accustomed he is to being the butt of everyone's jokes, especially Peter's. My rewrite would have Peter start genuinely complimenting Brian's book, then slowly transition into insults. Like, "Your book was so good, I read it in one sitting. And then I realized it was the perfect material for toilet paper because you can't satisfy women anymore." The bait and switch makes the insult hit harder. Stewie's Cootie crisis is another major beat. He finds out he has cooties and immediately spirals into a dramatic deathbed scenario. The scene where he's at the doctor's office and the doctor delivers the news so casually is gold. "You did test positive for cooties." Stewie's immediate reaction, "What? That's terrible. I think you need to get your affairs in order." The doctor's bluntness combined with Stewie's over-the-top panic is peak Family Guy. It's the absurdity of a baby facing his mortality over something as trivial as cooties. If I were Stewie, I'd have him use his supposed cooties as a superpower, a weapon to spread chaos. Imagine him trying to infect the entire neighborhood, cackling maniacally. The whole affairs in order thing would be him dictating his will to Rupert, leaving him a lifetime supply of evil schemes and a slightly used ray gun. The Chris Career Day segment is a classic example of the show's chaotic storytelling. Chris wants to be a ninja cop, inspired by Joe. But Joe's gone on a stakeout, which, by the way, is still ongoing apparently. So Chris has to fill in. The visual of him in a flimsy ninja costume yelling, "Hi-ya!" and his car getting towed from a handicap spot is peak Griffin incompetence. It's not just that he's bad at being a ninja cop, it's that the entire premise is built on a shaky foundation of Joe's absence. It's a microcosm of the family's dysfunction. My tweak here would be for Joe to actually show up for Career Day, but in his ninja uniform. He tries to arrest Chris for impersonating a ninja cop, leading to a ridiculous chase through the school. And then Peter's accidental Bonnie slip. This is a moment that could have been played for genuine drama, but instead it's immediately undercut by more silliness. Peter's trying to eat dinner, and he calls Lois Bonnie. The panic on his face is priceless. Lois's reaction is also key, a slow realization that Peter might be up to something. The show doesn't linger on this for long, though. It's just another little hiccup in the chaotic Griffin household. It's a character beat that could have been fleshed out, but it gets swallowed by the episode's frantic pace. If Peter said Bonnie and then immediately looked at Lois with a wild, desperate plea for her to play along, like, "Bonnie? No, Lois, I meant the other Bonnie. You know, the one from that episode with the, car?" And then Lois just stares at him, unimpressed. It's the forced improvisation that makes it funnier. And finally, Stewie's physician-assisted suicide plot. This is where the episode goes full dark comedy. Stewie, convinced he's dying from cooties, decides to take a bus to Vermont. He leaves Brian a video message detailing his funeral plans, complete with 2 suits for different social media aesthetics. The sheer level of planning and dramatic flair for something he probably doesn't have is classic Stewie. The penis-enlarging machine in his closet is a perfect callback to his usual obsessive tinkering. It's a moment that's both hilarious and morbidly fascinating. My rewrite of this would be Stewie faking his death to escape a PTA meeting. He leaves Brian the video, but it's all an elaborate ruse to avoid discussing his questionable leadership of the school play. Brian finds out, and the confrontation is epic, involving a rogue Play-Doh sculpture of Peter. Let's talk about the characters and how they fared in this particular episode. Brian, as usual, is the voice of reason, or at least he tries to be. He starts off questioning the whole party for a dog thing, which is a pretty valid point. He gets roasted by Peter, he gets stuck in the background of Joe's stakeout, and he's the reluctant recipient of Stewie's dramatic pronouncements. He's basically the straight man in a circus of clowns, and while he gets some good lines in, like his exasperated, "That's sort of just another jab at my penis, but sure," he often feels like he's just reacting to the madness rather than driving it. His best moment is probably when he's receiving Stewie's video message about the funeral suits. You can see the gears turning, trying to process the sheer absurdity of it all, and his mild temptation to check out the penis-enlarging machine is a classic Brian move, always curious, often to his own detriment. It's a solid outing for Brian, but nothing groundbreaking. He's doing what Brian does best, being the slightly neurotic, often cynical observer of the Griffin chaos. Peter, well, Peter is Peter. He forgets Brian's name, he roasts his dog mercilessly, and he accidentally calls his wife by another woman's name, leading to a whole subplot that he then has to awkwardly navigate. His "Happy Birthday Dog" opening is classic Peter, a dumb joke that sets the stage for his general incompetence. The roast jokes, while typical for the show, feel particularly mean-spirited in this episode, even for him. His highlight is definitely the panic and subsequent failed recovery after calling Lois Bonnie. The sheer, unadulterated horror on his face when he realizes his mistake is a masterclass in comedic terror. It shows that even Peter, in his own unique way, is capable of recognizing when he's messed up. He's used exactly as expected, as the engine of chaos and misunderstanding. Lois, as usual, is the long-suffering matriarch trying to keep the family from imploding. She's the one reacting to Peter's idiocy, trying to understand Stewie's melodramatic pronouncements, and generally being the most grounded person in the room. Her reaction to Peter calling her Bonnie is a good mix of annoyance and weary resignation, which is pretty much her default setting. She doesn't have a lot of standout moments, but she's essential for holding the episode together, even if it's just by a thread. She's used to keep Peter tethered, however loosely, to reality. Stewie. Oh, Stewie. This episode is his playground. He turns a case of cooties into a full-blown existential crisis, complete with a doctor's visit, a 20-year-old nurse, and a plan for physician-assisted suicide. His dramatic flair is dialed up to 11. His moment of absolute triumph is getting his Make-A-Wish application accepted to meet Gritty. It's such a ridiculous, specific wish that it perfectly encapsulates Stewie's particular brand of genius. The way he then weaponizes his supposed impending death for dramatic effect with the video message about funeral suits and the penis-enlarging machine is just peak Stewie. He's utilized as the show's primary engine for surrealistic, dark humor, and he delivers in spades. Chris is mostly there to be awkward and oblivious. He's the one who asks Joe about his hat for career day, and then provides the crucial clue about Stewie's whereabouts by checking his Instagram. He's not given much to do, but his brief interaction with Bonnie is a classic example of the show pushing boundaries into deeply uncomfortable territory. He serves his purpose as the slightly dim-witted younger brother. Joe, as always, is off on a stakeout. He gives Brian a stick, claims it's a magic wand, and then spends the rest of the episode doing stakeout stuff, which apparently involves just sitting across the street from the party.
It's a running gag that's meant to highlight his dedication or his absurdity, depending on how you look at it. His dialogue is minimal, and his presence feels more like a plot device to keep him out of the main action. He's used to establish a tangential plot that never really goes anywhere significant. Meg is, well, Meg. She's present, she's slightly pathetic, and she gets a brief moment of trying to spice things up for her parents in the bedroom. It's a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment that reinforces her role as the overlooked middle child. She's there to be ignored or awkwardly inserted into uncomfortable situations. All right, let's dig into some of the stuff most people probably missed while they were too busy scratching their heads or looking at their phones. First off, that entire Uber driver Ninja Warrior segment. It's so out of left field, right? But if you think about it, it's a perfect encapsulation of the show's willingness to just throw anything at the wall. It's not just random animation, it's a meta-commentary on how shows like Family Guy operate. They have so many writers and animators, they can just churn out these bizarre, standalone bits that have absolutely no bearing on the main plot. And somehow, it works. It's a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment that says, hey, we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. It's a flex. Then there's Joe's insistence that the stick he gave Brian was a magic wand that caused a bus crash. Now, if you're a hardcore fan, you might remember Joe's history of, let's call them accidents. This isn't just a throwaway line, it's a subtle callback to his character's inherent capacity for accidental mayhem. It reinforces the idea that Joe, despite his job, is a walking disaster waiting to happen, and he's somehow managed to turn even his blunders into, well, something. It's a tiny detail that adds another layer to his already bizarre character. Also, pay attention to Stewie's Flintstones cocktail for his cooties. He lists off 17 Barneys, 18 Wilmas. I have to take the Bam Bams just to keep things moving. This isn't just a random list of Flintstones characters. It's a darkly humorous way of showing how Stewie is exaggerating his illness. He's taking fictional medicine based on fictional characters, symbolizing how his entire Cootie crisis is built on a foundation of make-believe and hyperbole. It's a visual gag that underscores his dramatic personality. And when Stewie is talking about his funeral, and he mentions the black suit is for the wake and the wool is for the Graham story, that's a sharp, modern jab at how people curate their online personas, even in death. It's a comment on performative grief and the importance of social media presence, even for a fictional baby. It's a little detail that shows the writers are paying attention to current cultural trends, even if they're applying them to the most absurd context possible. Finally, let's talk about Peter's accidental use of Bonnie instead of Lois. This is a classic Family Guy move. It's not just a slip of the tongue, it's a moment that could have led to a huge marital crisis. But because it's Family Guy, it's immediately brushed under the rug.
The fact that they even include it, that Peter's inner monologue is a sheer panic, and Lois's reaction is that slow burn of suspicion, shows a commitment to these minor character moments that can easily be missed if you're not paying attention to the subtler emotional beats. It's the commitment to the bit, no matter how uncomfortable. You know, this episode had some moments that just didn't quite land for me. Take the whole Uber driver Ninja Warrior segment. I get that Family Guy likes its random cutaways, but this felt particularly egregious. It was so disconnected from everything else. It felt like they just had this animation lying around and decided to shove it in. If I were rewriting that, I'd have the ninja driver be the one getting the rideshare, not giving it. Imagine a highly trained assassin trying to hail an Uber only to get picked up by a clueless civilian who keeps asking him about his day and offering him snacks. The ninja's internal struggle to maintain his lethal professionalism while being subjected to suburban pleasantries, that's where the comedy gold is. Alternatively, what if the whole Cootie plot was actually real? Imagine Stewie, genuinely terrified, trying to isolate himself, but his evil genius instincts kick in, and he starts developing a Cootie-spreading weapon. It would be a classic Stewie scheme, but with a real sense of dread and urgency. His Flintstones cocktail could be actual experimental medicine he's concocting, and the 20-year-old nurse could be a willing accomplice in his potentially world-ending experiments. That would have been way more interesting than just him being dramatic. And the ending, where Stewie is supposedly going for physician-assisted suicide, but he's actually at a Phish concert, that felt like a cheap out. If they wanted to go dark, they should have committed. What if Stewie actually did go through with it? Not in a gruesome way, but in a Stewie-esque, darkly comedic way. Imagine him leaving a perfectly crafted, eloquent suicide note for Brian, and then just fading out, surrounded by his evil inventions. It would have been a shocker, for sure, but it would have felt earned. Instead, it's a fake-out that just makes the whole dramatic build-up feel pointless. A more impactful ending might have been for Stewie to confess to Brian that the Cooties were entirely fabricated, a desperate cry for attention because he felt neglected. Brian, instead of being angry, could have just sat down with him and genuinely talked about it, offering him comfort and reassurance. It would have been a rare moment of genuine connection and emotional maturity from both characters, something the show rarely delves into. Now, for the grand finale, the verdict. I'm giving this episode a solid 4.2 out of 10, and that decimal point, that's earned by the sheer unadulterated randomness of the Uber Ninja Warrior bit. It's objectively baffling and, in its own weird way, memorable. What specifically earned those points? Brian's deadpan reactions to Peter's roasts and Stewie's utterly committed performance as a dying baby. Those were the glimmers of the Family Guy we know and love. What specifically lost them? Pretty much everything else. The Cootie plot was overdone, the character interactions felt forced, and the entire episode lacked any real momentum. This episode is for the hardcore Family Guy completists, the ones who need to see every single episode, no matter how questionable. The casual viewer, they'd probably just see this as a confusing mess. Who will love it? Die-hard fans who appreciate the show's relentless absurdity. Who will be bored? Anyone looking for a coherent story or meaningful character development. What would have pushed the score higher? A single unifying plot. If they had just stuck with Brian's birthday party and explored the themes of aging and identity for Brian and Peter's character, that might have been something. Or if Stewie's Cootie crisis had been more focused, maybe leading to a genuine lesson about anxiety rather than a fake death scare. The episode feels like it's trying to do too many things and succeeds at none of them. It's a perfect example of Family Guy at its most indulgent, where the jokes don't serve the story and the story doesn't serve the characters. It's like watching a compilation of deleted scenes that never should have been deleted, or in this case, never should have been included in the first place. Ultimately, Happy Birthday Dog is a reminder that even a show as long-running as Family Guy can have an off day, or in this case, an off episode, where the ingredients are there, but the final dish is just bland. It's a show that, much like Peter Griffin's memory, seems to forget the purpose of a good story sometimes, opting instead for cheap laughs and nonsensical detours that leave you wondering what the point was. And that, my friends, is a shame. Because when Family Guy gets it right, it's truly something special. But this was not that. Not even close.